Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to the House of Reawakening Minds. We are once again happy that you could join us on this holy day, and we are ecstatic over the fact that Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey is here. I want to say something that it passed me by on the first Friday when Grand Sheik was here, because he's here on the first and third Fridays, as many of you know. But I just shared with him that tonight, or this month actually, October 2018 marks the 7th anniversary of him coming here to teach. And he's been teaching here consistently since October 2011. I think that's worthy of a hand clap. And because of him and because of the teaching, many of which, most of which is on YouTube, thanks to Sister Delilah L. and others, Brother Nunaji, those videos have gone around the world probably 2-3 times over, and I get calls, we were talking about that today, every day from someone who's awakening, maybe from a video that was done in 2011 or 2012, or maybe it was one from just last week, but these lectures have a strong impact on people of the Moorish nationality waking up and finding out who they are. And I really appreciate, when I was trying to find out who I was, I appreciate Sister Zodiacus L, may she rest in peace and rise in power. But I thank the Creator that she connected me with Grand Sheik, and he agreed to come. I met him in September 2011. He started in October and has consistently been here all these 7 years. And we eventually expanded from once a month to twice a month, and we are just grateful for you. Thank you so much, Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
All right. Thank you for maintaining the venue, and thank the people for supporting. One of the things that we want to do tonight is do a little synopsis on military operations at North America, King Alfred Plan, and Rex 84. How many of you are familiar with that? I know most of you are. Raise your hand if you're familiar with it. Right? You ever heard of it? Little? So how many, look around, how many people are aware? All right, now King Alfred, Rex 84 plan, I'll just read the cover to give you a synopsis. King Alfred, Rex 84, is Executive Order 11490, and it was released officially October 19. Isn't that interesting?
October 19. Wow.
October 19, 1969. On this day.
Wow.
This executive order was authorized October of 1969 to counteract the minority. These are persons tagged as blacks, Indians, Latinos, Puerto Ricans, and poor whites in their rise from up under the depression and powers that be, the government, King Alfred, Rex 84, in the event of widespread and continuing and coordinated racial disturbances in the United States, King Alfred, at the discretion of the President, is to be put into action immediately. And what this is actually a military plan that is actually a continuation of the European operations of inquisition against the Moors. In modern times, it would be called European occupation of so-called Indian territories. First of the Moors who were called Indians were the Moors of the southern territories of M.S.T, which you know as Haiti, Trinidad, Dominica, Borican, etc., Arawak and Taino Moors, Carib Moors. And those are the first of us that the tag, and understand Indian is a tag too, it's not an identity. And it's important for you to know the true history in order to understand the world of politics today, because one of the things that European sociologists and historians and including Asiatics who are trained by them to keep the people asleep as to what's really going on, is to every few generations change names of lands and people in order to bury history, in order to disconnect the people from the pedigree and the bloodline and the inherited lands. Which is why, for the most part, many adults of Asiatic African descent in the North, or in North America and the Western Hemisphere, if you give them even a child's level test on fundamental geography, they actually think that America is a country. They don't even know that America is a continent. And they use that level of consciousness in everyday conscious conversations without recognizing that they're totally incompetent. And that in doing so, they also dismiss their right of claim to the land, because they're incompetent. And the other violation against themselves and their own inheritances is to continue to call the foreign Europeans Americans, which transfers their false claim of right on your land. All right? And the other issue is not knowing the politics that took place in North America, and not knowing that the Europeans who conquered the Western Hemisphere are not white people. That is a noble tag, or what you would call a status caste, that actually belonged to Moors. It has nothing to do with complexion. And the Europeans took on the noble designation of sovereign officially in 1854 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan Act, and the same being duplicated 1863 in Chicago, Illinois. And most of the people, by not being educated in civics and real history and politics, actually think that the Europeans who are operating at North America are the great white sovereigns of the North. And so they call the Europeans white man, which actually means sovereign and ruler of the land. They don't know that because they don't know the history, and they don't know noble tags, or what you call designations. It's unfortunate because very often in our activities of attempting to liberate ourselves from European colonial operations, effects, and the Christian black codes derived from Unam Sanctam policy, our people end up going in circles and stepping right back into the traps that they're actually trying to get out of. And the other issue is them not knowing or being aware that most of their leaders are assigned to them. They do not, most of them do not develop spiritually or naturally from among the people they're assigned. And one of the keys to recognizing that as soon as they start these people on the trek of the 14th Amendment civil rights appearance of liberating you platform, not knowing that they're actually leading them into the straw construct set up by the popes of Rome to claim their estate under the 14th Amendment, which they constructed after the closing of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands in 1868. And this is when also the Negro, Black, and colored tags were being heavily reinforced into society. Even during that time, they were still designating the people as Moors, and then some of them as black or Moors, then just blacks, and then different areas, Moors, Negroes, to divide them against each other, Latinos, etc. According to the language, because what they call Spanish is not Spanish, it's actually Moorish Latin. There's no such thing as Spanish in language, not really. It's Latin. And so to divide the Moors against each other, they would call some of us Latinos, Latins, West Indians, and the tag West Indians come from the sociologists when they were led to the Atlantis Islands instead of to the mainland to the north. And so their original destination was Madagascar and Sindh, which you call today India, which was one of the trade routes of what is also referred to as the Old Silk Road. And this is our trade routes of ancient Asia and Africa, from North Asia into South Asia. And South Asia is what you call Africa now. And the people, all of them, are called Asiatics. So many of our people who don't know their bloodline, pedigree, and history think that the only Asiatics are Chinese, but not knowing that they're Asiatics also. You know, now one of the keys to the Europeans' power is to miseducate the people and make them themselves deny their own history and pedigree by thinking that their only history is tagged as African, which is a false premise. Our history is Asian. You know, and Africa is after that. Are we clear? We went into Africa as Asia and Asians. Are we clear? Now, also they will have rituals that they will have among Europeans designating our history, and they'll usually talk about signaling Queen Dodo. And this would be under Hannibal, Hasdrubal, etc., and the Carthaginian orders, etc. They will also hide their history under Saracen. So when you go into Carthaginians, Saracens, etc., you're all dealing with Moors. All right? And the other deal that the Romans would do would take the Asiatics in history, and this is why you see a lot of the old stone statues, you always see them knock the noses off. And this is so that you would not recognize the bone structure, and recognize that most even your old goddesses that they call Europeans are really more white women. You know, and so and also recognize that Asiatic culture and African culture are essentially matriarchy in their character. And so when you go into history and you go into history not with that knowledge, your concepts will usually be wrong or either twisted, flawed, and corrupted. And so keep those things in mind. I want to go in. How many of you have seen some of the issues of King Alfred? All right. Now, give you a synopsis on the history on some of this, which was redacted documents. In Arizona, and mostly in the West, the United States Service Corporation operatives, in order to drain the resources of the people of the land under the guise of being government, they would do a lot of experiments with planes and stuff like that, and old computers, and they would store them in the deserts and stuff like that, you know, where it's dry and stuff doesn't rot quickly. And they would have old mainframe computers out there, old planes that still work, you know. And they would park them out there, line them up. They do that with cars too. And they would sell or auction off parts sometimes. And with the old mainframe computer systems, they would wipe the hard drives and stuff like that. One of the men who had bought some of the computers at the auction apparently knew a little bit more about computers than they expected that he did. And some of the residuals of military operations was drawn off them computers. That's how this got into the public. They disappeared him. That's one of the terms they used. They disappeared him. He was in jail for a while, but they disappeared him. Now, originally what was made available was heavily redacted. Redaction is where you see them block out words block out words. That's called redaction. And we used computers to read through some of the redactions and restored a lot of it. And that's what you have right here, King Alfred. All right. Now, of course, it was not meant for public display, because this is actually was top secret. All right. But what was available, this was only pieces of it. But what's available is informationally devastating to the political platform. Are we clear? Now, many of you heard of King Alfred, and many people had this information in their hand. The interesting thing that I find, many of our people who had this available, instead of really going into the political dynamics and the details, having really an understanding of history, will begin to argue racism and color, prejudice, the party line, rather than going into the science, the political science, which is actually a diversion, if you get the point. So I want to point out to you some of the basic primal principles of operation with the King Alfred, and mainly to do what we do in general, and that is to reduce the level of naivety that really sits on our people like a monkey on their back. Our people are really naive about the real world. And one of the things that we also want to remind you is, because our people have been naive, there's this concept that many of them have that government, unqualified, just government, is moral and ethical. And so they're assuming government looks out for them. They're assuming that someone in government is credible, honorable, has integrity. So it's very important for you all to remember, and always take notes too, that in the context of what we're sharing with you, keep in mind the Organic Act of Congress 1871, and this is, in your own research, is only to give you proof of background of truth of what is really operating here, distinguished from what many people will tell you. In other words, you're dealing with a de facto imposter, fake government organized since 1871 that have been pretending to be the legitimate government with which the Moors made treaties with when the United States, the Republic, was established. Are we clear? Okay. Everybody clear on that? Good. And it's important to be clear on that, so that while we're talking, that you never assume that the people that are representing themselves as government is the legitimate government, that they're imposters, and they know they're imposters. The thing that many of them fear is that you ever found that out. The thing that makes many of them angry and abusive with you is because they are a fraud government, and their missionary work is to destroy your families. But to do it without you figuring that that's what they're doing. And in doing so, they buy off a lot of people among our own to keep us in what you call blind faith as we get raped. And logically, after generation, unless some of the elders are brave enough to tell the truth and go against the grain, the next generation doesn't get the information, and they're not aware of what's really going on. They just know that they keep getting poorer. Their families keep breaking up. They can't maintain personal relationships. The IRS takes all of their stuff. Their communities are being gentrified. 90% of the people in jail are their children and their wives and their sons and their uncles and dads, and they think it's racism and prejudice because the so-called black leader tells them that. But they don't know that he's being trained by Rome. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And that they're actually suffering European occupation under the Unam Sanctam policy. Now that's an absolute fact. And so, but also keep in mind that this knowledge is not unknown to the leadership. It's just that when usually when they will references this information, they will stay in the safe zone. You know, talk about racism and prejudice and lack of jobs and make people think that they're really speaking on their behalf and that, you know, they're really meaningful, you know, type stuff. And people get all emotional and think that emotion is spirituality. And, you know, sort of like paid off keepers of the pasture to keep the sheep calm while they get sheared and everybody got sweaters but them type thing, you know. And so you always see the sheep gathered in the corner in the snow talking about one day Jesus is coming and cover us and save us and stuff. And that's pretty much what you call black spiritual culture. They're always begging for God's salvation type thing. It never comes, but it continues. But the pastor always there to collect, finance, you know, God's half type thing. And the people will never know that they're actually working for Rome and the Lords of London. And as a reminder of you, to you all, about the tithe system that they collect in the houses of what they call worship, that was set up by Pope Sylvester II. And the tithe system is 10% Roman tax under agreement with the kings and rulers to get along with the popes of Rome who declared themselves God. And it had absolutely nothing to do with Jesus, Moses, and the prophets. It has everything to do with Roman rulership. And that fact is known even by the preachers that promote that tithing gain, which is a Roman tax, and then lie and say Jesus' bank account at Chase Manhattan. And that's the truth. So I'm going to get into, I think it would be well to get into, even though it's page 375, this is only because the book is redacted, but in actual page, it's only about 18 pages in, you know, because a lot of stuff is missing. Can you find that on there? It would be page 374. So look for the number, not volume, as far as it goes. Start from the beginning. And that would be the page that deals with, see where it says, all right, 372 on there?
372. You're asking the wrong person here.
Yeah, go to the next page.
Next page?
Yeah. Let's go to the next page.
That's it? Yeah. Do it? Right here. Yeah, you better do it.
You better do it.
Now, since we're here, these are, while this is not immediate subject, these are maps that they have of the different prisons around North America and locations. All of them are actually concentration camps. So I want to remind you also that when the concepts that they have with you, that these are prisons, they're actually private European stock. These are stock POW camps. And most of them are women's prisons, so we're clear. Now, so as of late, most of your latest growing prison population are the women, because they're tagging the women. They've already pretty much ruined most of the men. And they've broken most of the families, so now they're after the women. Now, the interesting thing about it is, this information is not unknown by these so-called black leaders. Most of them are 32 and 33-degree Masons, got a Moorish fez in secret, and still call the people black. But they're paid off to do that. But the people believe in them because they're usually called reverend. You know, and they got a 501c3 skull and bones kickback agreement, which is what their tax exempt system actually is. That's Lyndon Baines Johnson's way of paying off their Negroite laborers. You just find the tracer. Scroll through that and so that they can see this stuff too. I want to share with you. Most of you know this part, but I want to make this point to you. These are infiltrated organizations under surveillance. This is so that you don't fall for the naive idea of not thinking that any activities that we do are secret, because everything is infiltrated, are we clear? All organization activities are infiltrated. And these are some of the ones they will admit to. Number one, the Black Muslims. Number two, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Number three, Congress of Racial Equality. Number four, Uhuru Movement. Number five, Group on Advanced Leadership. Number six, Freedom Now Party. 7, United Black Nationalists of America. That's 7. 8, the New Pan-African Movement. 9, the National Urban League. 10, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NACP. Number 11, Committee on Racial and Religious Progress. And 9 times out of 10, your leaderships are operatives. Are we clear? Or the persons directly associated with them are usually operatives, whether it's known or not by the people. Are we clear? This is pretty much why most of the time when we really try to get things done, it never succeeds, or it's undermined, or just when the people are starting to make progress, here comes the IRS, or some kind of foreclosure thing, or some kind of interruption, or somebody getting profiled on the street and locked up to stop the progress. All of that is planned. None of that is accidental. Are we clear? Now, another key that I want to say to you is the people's level of consciousness to what's really going on also has a spiritual effect in the atmosphere. And the more you know about what's going on, the less that the dark side of the priesthood can operate. Are we clear? Because, like they'll show you metaphorically in their movies where vampires can't stand light, well, that's actually true in the sense that vampire exploiters, traitors, among yourself, etc., do not want to be exposed to light. Are we clear? Which is why when you start exposing what you would call, what they like to call secret information or the priesthood information, they get mad, all upset, and stuff like that because they can't stand the light, because they can't get their evil off, if you get the whole point. They have to keep the people asleep. And understand another way that you need to look at things and not be emotional about it, just be realistic about it, is that belief systems are used for mind control. They're not really spiritual systems. And it does not condemn people who deal with beliefs, are we clear? But the masses are not aware of the fact that the priesthoods, the imam, the rabbis themselves do not deal with the belief systems that they teach to people, are we clear? They perfect the art of teaching belief systems, but they themselves do not live by what they teach. Never do, never did. They're all Gnostics, all of them. Whether they're in Islam, whether they're in Judaism, whether they're dealing with Christianity, they're all Gnostics. Are we clear? Now, one of the things why those truths are not told to the masses is because if the masses knew the truth, it would immediately take their hands out their pockets. It would get them leeches and parasites' hands out their pockets and recognize the Creator in heaven is not broke, never was broke, don't need no money from the IRS or the Federal Reserve to pay no bills, and Jesus don't have an iPhone 10, so don't worry about giving him his hand, type thing. belief systems are a business used for what is called social solace systems, triple S. Write that down. Social solace systems.
What's that middle word?
Say it again.
What's the middle word?
Social
Silence.
solace.
Silence.
Solace. You know, it's sort of like, you know, like
SOLAS.
when you have a little child that's crying and stuff like that, and you want to soothe them and, oh, don't cry, and you hug them, and they got a splinter in their finger, and they really, you know, just need an operation type thing. And that's, you know, you soothe them.
So social silence system.
Solace. Social solace systems. Say, oh, all right. And this is what's given to the masses in the name of religion. Are we clear? So I'm making that very clear. And that's done deliberately. It's not accidental. And one of the things that is kind of hard for people to accept is that when they see men in nice clothing and royal colors and stuff, pontificating about Allah and Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and Jesus and in heaven, and Moses, and bringing sandwiches on Thursday, and you're the special one, and stuff like that. They don't believe that themselves. And it doesn't mean that there's no truth in it. Do you understand? That's not the point. Meaning that they don't really represent the prophets. They represent prophets in their pockets. Because the truth, you know, is sort of like, you know how like Dr. Naila, when we were talking about the water issue, you know, back here, and I said we're going to put a sump pump in there. So it takes knowledge and skills. It's just simply work, but it's simply knowing what to do and doing it. But we're not going to go down there and everybody talk about lay your hands upon the wall, pray, and then it ain't going to flood. No, because as soon as it rains, it's going to flood again until we fix the problem. You know, Mother Nature. Nature don't say, you know, nature storm out there and stuff and say, well, I'm Baptist, you know, I got saved yesterday. I just talked to Jesus too. You know, then I go out and everybody getting wet and I ain't getting wet. No, it doesn't really work like that. You know, so we need to get over ourselves and understand that the truth don't change or pass away. The rules of life apply to everybody. Ego has nothing to do with it, because divine law of nature does not recognize person or station. You call yourself what you want to call yourself. If it's raining, you getting wet. Put on some galoshes and chill. Do what you got to do. But the point of it is, what I'm saying to you is, and I want to say this too, religion is actually gathered truths based in the studies of the workings of nature that are set in stone, or what you say, written and preserved in human communications, and that is provable by experience of life. Are we clear? It's called Gnostic wisdom. Are we clear? The studies of the transits of the sun in the heavens, the equinoxes. Are we clear? Of the sun, the seasons, how it affects the earth and all living matter. Are we clear? That's religion. Are we clear? Now, and the philosophies that is drawn off of that in the studies of nature, of the harmonies and respect for life. and the preservation of life, and foodstuffs for life, and the art of studying foodstuffs, root plant, stem plant, leaf plant, foodstuff, according to the 4 gates of the season. Are we clear? That's religion all over the world. And it's also, you can call it agriculture too. Are we clear? Spirituality is from time immemorial the studied knowledge of breathing techniques, breath. Are we clear? And the art of preparing studies, cleansing the body, waking up DNA memory by breathing techniques, that's spirituality. All the other stuff they tell you spirituality is, no, it's not. They're lying. Are we clear? Now, so once you understand that spirituality does not necessarily mean religion, and religion does not necessarily mean spirituality. Point that I'm making to you is the fact that the priesthood do not inform the masses of these fundamental ancient truths indicates their dishonesty and indicates their desire to control the people, not really raise them intellectually and spiritually. Are we clear? The other deal is, with all due respect, most people never know that the revs and the imams and the brothers and sisters, grand sheiks and stuff with these titles and everything have all the books. Bible, Quran, Uwasti, the Vedas, Urantia book, etc. Bhagavad Gita, all of them, that's what makes them who they are. However, when they're approaching this stuff from a selfish perspective or an ego perspective, they will take one book and present it to the people and say, this is God's book, and not let them know that that's a narrow view of things, that's a narrow truth of things. And there's one culture on earth, and that culture is cosmology. Are we clear? The distinctions are linguistic applications. Are we clear? But the truth of religion is all over the planet. And it ain't necessarily hallelujah to you worship thing. It's actually the workshop of the mind. Are we clear? And much that is done in the name of religion is ritual, which really is ritual. Actually, you look at that from the idea of arithmetic, mathematics, etc. You're still dealing with star chart, numerology, ephemerides, and simply using the body form to duplicate or to dance to the rhythms of that which is expressed in nature. And people start thinking that that's religion. Cultural expression. You know, and if you just teach what it actually is, then you could understand a lot of things around the world. When you see different dances that they do, different costumes that they wear, how they do certain architecture in buildings. If you really knew the science, you could see the same thing all around the world that you thought was actually different. It's only expressed in different colors, you know, and oh, wow, yeah, oh, I got that. You know, but if you don't know the basics, you be thinking, well, see, over here in Tibet and stuff, 2 and 2 is really spiritually 3 and a half. No, it's not. 2 and 2 is 4. You don't get it confused, and don't let nobody tell you other than that. Anyway, let's get back to this. You must know that these guys already know this stuff. But the deal of it is what it really is this. Many of the people that have been communicating with you over the years in organizations and that have had their hands in your pockets in the name of broken gods all the time. The gods are always broke. They never They got all these powerful guys, but they always are broke. That's just for this week. And they make a promise for next week, and oh dang, I forgot that. Let's collect some more so I can fulfill the other promise that, oh, your grandmom didn't get yet. But one of these days type things. Is that they don't want you to ever stop and really think and just dawn on you that you're being played. And that they're hiding behind Allah. Doesn't make Allah not real, or God not real, or Yeshua not real in the sense that you may think of them, but that these are being used as a front to get your trust, to get your faith. And the real deal is they want to get in your pockets, and draw off you and get you stifled enough and hypnotized enough to make sure they got weekly payments coming in. And then you get enough sheeple, you got some nice fur coats going on. And they're always begging because they're always chilling. Yeah, you chilling, but they really chilling. You know what I mean? She got, the Creator gave them their wool. You the one walking around in, cashmere coats and stuff, doing the moonwalk and stuff at their expense. And they honestly look at the people as absolutely no different. What does this mean? This is French. And this is used in relationship to the people in general by the Europeans operating at North America. That's French. What does that mean?
Property.
Say again? Huh?
Property.
Say it?
Stop.
Personal property? Cattle.
Livestock.
What'd you say?
Livestock, what he said.
That's exactly what it means. That's just what it means. It means cattle. And these people haven't caught on yet why they're treated like cattle. They treat us like cattle. We gotta make them know that we are somebody. Like they didn't know that in the first place. You ain't figured it out yet. That they always knew that you're human. They denationalized you in order to justify themselves to call you that. That's why they don't want you dealing with nationality. Because you removed the nationality, it removed your descendability. They removed you from all right of claim of inheritances. All clear. So that has a political ramification. It's not just a, say, a grammatical error or some historical flaw that they introduced. No, that is a political purpose. This is why they use the code system, Negro, black, colored, and stuff like that, that has nothing to do with the human family, to not only remove you from the historical tie, but to remove you from descendability. And then put their name on you as a curse. So when you buy or sell with the mark or the number of their name, it's already state property. And you all know that, a few years back, many white people start wearing clothes with state property and think it's like clever, not knowing that they just said to the world that they are Christian cattle, because they really don't know the history. And then, some old heads ain't schooled them of the real history because they don't want to rock the boat type thing. And so as generations pass, they have less and less knowledge because everybody's feeding them a bunch of BS instead of telling them the hard truth of life. And they go out into the world, get crushed, and can't understand why life is so hard. It's because the adults pretty much sold them out, playing belief systems instead of telling them the hard truth about life. And so busy being selfish for themselves, they laid no foundation of any civic instruction for the children and keep building churches and bars and making them think that that's what the life is. And that has become the dead culture that you see in our communities. in the name of the Lord type thing. And the only one getting over is Rev and the parasite drug dealers, and they all partners in secret. Islam, good brother.
Islam, Grand Sheik. Grand Sheik, I heard you say that they put their name on you as a curse. Can you
Yes.
say more about that?
Huh?
Can you say more about that?
Yes. You're very aware of the fact that in North America, that one of the things that the Europeans would do, people of Asiatic African descent, is strip them of their pedigree names and religion. That is a fact of the operations of what is known as the Christian Black Codes. In other words, they would not let you transact business or do business in Asiatic African names. In other words, if you were Il, Bey, Day, Ali, Muhammad, etc., they would tag you Smith, Jones, and Johnson. It's a brand. But that would be their versions, even though the names may actually be traced to Moorish origin, that's a European version of the name. And so in the law of inheritance, you transact business in that name, you have no inheritance. Doesn't matter how many generations you do it. This is why the European would strip the Asiatics of their names. Inheritance, what you call hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal, are preserved in the nomenclature or in the family name, are clear, and in the pedigree. And so the pedigree would be your origin and your nationality. Are we clear? So the origin would be Asiatic, right? You'd be Asiatic. The nationality would be specifically like Moor, or what you call, that's short for Moroccan or American, right? If you're in the West, all right? Like South Asia soil, or what you call Tamari, or what you call Africa today, you got roughly around 54 nation states. Most of the names that are used today in the different territories are not aboriginal to the continent. But in general, like you would say, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, etc. Those would be nationalities, are clear. Now, in the issue of land resources and what you call territorial sovereign rights, you would have what you call imaginary borders that would be recognized by the nation states themselves in an international law venue. And so, say my territory may end here, but yet I could be standing on your territory and this territory at the same time. So there would be two different jurisdictions, all right? But in the rule of law, like say if you're at Tunisia, say you're Tunisia, right? And you're Morocco, they still both Moors. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And but yet those are jurisdictional territories, all right? So as an example, years ago when they were doing the Million Woman March, and we were setting up security for the Million Woman March, we had a meeting in Collingswood, New Jersey at a diner. So they did the whole diner, and I was meeting with the mayor of Camden, the police chief, security, medical, etc., and we were setting up security. And what I was doing, I was dealing with them to eliminate the cost of the bus for the women's buses for the Million Woman March, using my Moorish nationality. And so we were setting that up. Now, at the time, it was a brother from the Nation of Islam. It was a brother that was visiting from Tunisia, that was going to the Muhammad's Mosque. And they were up there, and one of the brothers knew me, and we were just talking when we were up there. And he was saying, I want to introduce you to this brother, you know how they all, just communication. And he said, I want to introduce you to my black brother, that type of stuff. I said, don't even start because you know I'm not black. And so the Tunisian brother says, oh, you're a follower of Noble Drew Ali? I said, I'm not a follower of anyone. I studied the prophet, who is our prophet. He doesn't make followers, he makes leaders, right? But the point that I said to him, I said, if you would do any good in this conversation, let's cut it short. You're Tunisian, tell that brother he's not black and that you're a Moor. He said, well, yes, but, that's all you have to say. Because for him to allow him to even get that off, because they know that these people here don't know nothing about nationality. But, if he come, it's not his obligation, but he should, teach them. Because these people think here that, human beings are crayons, and they think because they're into Islam, they know who they are. No, they don't know who they are. I want to throw that in at the moment. But that's very important to understand that. Now, I want to complete my answer to your question. Now, ask that again because I want to put it in context.
I heard you say, Grand Sheik used the word curse, and then please
and that is the curse.
That's what I'm.
Yes. See, because the curse is to, when they say, like when the Europeans to justify their abuses of the Moabites and Hammatites, so when they're referring to Ham, and you're actually dealing with dynasties, they talk about Noah's sons and stuff like that. We didn't begin there. It's really a justification of abusing us. And the black tag, which is a tag, because black does not mean dark. Black actually means pale colors. Black man is actually the European. See, well, you didn't know that? Again, there's a lot to learn. I'm glad you're here. People, this is one thing that you must really understand. Black is actually from Middle English. 1100 to 1500 has no ancient origin in the sense that you think it do or does. That has been taught to our people by people called so-called Negro black scholars. And they know that they're lying to their people. But, that little tithe collection, they're kind of happy with that. So they would kind of gladly help maintain the ignorance of their own people. Now, so you would look at etymology. Did you, Dr. Nayo, you happen to have flash drives?
I did.
All right. Anybody, get a flash drive from her, and I want you to look at the William Dungy case of 1855, and before we're finished, we'll take a moment and I'll show you the etymology of black. This is for your own information and also for you to share with others. And this is another thing, when people are talking to you, and I'm always, when I say you, I mean that in a plural sense, into myself, and they see that you're not aware of that, then they can play on your psyche. And also when they know you're sensitive to that, you're getting all upset, they already know that you're under a spell. See, because a person can read, they don't bother, I don't care if they call me black, I already know I'm not black. And if it's meant to be pejorative, I don't take that as an insult. Yeah, do your thing. I just take the pineal gland, flip it around, and send it right back to them. Keep on doing. The point is, don't let them put their spirit on you. Because that's what the intent is. Because it's called casting spells. Once you understand how spell casting works, you're going to start learning how to ward a lot of stuff off. Just chill. They don't know where your mind is if you get the whole point. And really, once you really understand this, when people like that have negative intent, you really kind of feel bad for them because they might hurt themselves messing with you, not knowing where your pineal gland is. It's kind of dangerous messing with people who really understand how nature works. You know, this is why you also don't never use those powers to the negative. Always seek to do good. You know, but people who wish, ill, you just give them their gift back. See, because then it's not coming from you. They won't give you a nasty gift. I got that. And keep it moving. You know what I mean? And then they wonder why something happened to them in a few minutes. But you don't use that energy. But don't let them put that spirit on you. Anyway, black is Middle English. It comes from Old High German, and it means white spot. And it means pale colors. So when so-called Negroite scholars be teaching their own children of this education of the little black boy, playing on their psyche, and they're thinking their skin, and they got, a psychological inferiority complex. That demon just threw a spell on them. You understand? And they don't know that because they can't read. You understand what I'm saying? And then the parent, who can't read also, sitting there trying to soothe them, and the child knows BS, they go along with it, but the damage is done. You see the point? And they set a crook, or what you call a ridge, an unseen ridge, and a good priest can clean it up, but somebody want to play games with these children. And they grow up with all kinds of ridges in their mind, and they become handicapped. They're mental handicaps. Then somebody will say, well, what we want to do is get the children together and pray upon it and give them self-esteem. No, that's BS. It's extreme BS. It's tell the truth. Teach them to read. So etymology dictionary or English language, make sure you get one, or two, or three. Go ahead. Yeah. Get the mic, please, because I need your mic.
Just the part of speech that it is. You must know the part of speech it is. And I don't think black is a noun. It's some other kind of what?
Yeah, so even third grade grammar. See, let's take advantage of this moment. Third grade grammar, right? 8 parts of speech. Not deep scholarship, right? 8 parts of speech. What is black? Ordinary dictionary. Black's an adjective. Third grader, right? That ain't contaminated with our belief systems that we put on them yet. They're not confused because they're at an age where, they're pliable, but they ain't worried about getting fired off their job for telling the truth. So if you got a boogie in your nose, they'll tell you got a boogie in your nose. Don't say that in public. You got a boogie in your nose. Children are honest, too. We mess them up with our belief systems. But third grade. What part of speech is black? Adjective. Now, adult who can't think, who doesn't think, or somebody who deals with belief systems don't deal with facts. So they never take into account black's an adjective. That means it's not a noun. So if it's not a noun, it can't be a what? Name of a person, place, thing, or idea. Isn't that very basic? We ain't even got into the definition. Do you know how many so-called black scholars will sit up there and argue with the ancient black gods of Egypt? You need to understand. Hey, the word don't go past 1100. You see the point? Now you can take somebody's thinking. Now if, that's like somebody arguing about King Tut's iPhone 11. and it doesn't mean that they didn't have communication systems more advanced than that, but he didn't have no iPhone 11. So we need not discuss whether his battery is dead or not. You know what I mean? What apples he got? What he had an apple. It's like, nah. You know, it's like saying, you know, George Washington, when his horse got lame up there near Trenton and stuff, when he did it, he went and got, he had a Camaro in the garage, you know what I'm saying? He needed a battery, but all he needed was a jump, and then he went to see Lafayette, and that's how he crossed the Delaware up there near Trenton and stuff, and they won the war. You know, you already know when they start that there's BS. So, in scholarship, you know, how scholars deal all over the world, keep this in mind, all over the world, etymology dictionaries are a basic tool to scholarship. Are we clear? Now, when everybody, you all know this, but I'm reminding you in case you, etymology dictionary is, and dictionaries, but at least one of them, is basic scholar research tool. Are we clear? So, like say, if they're doing some research into Plato, Shakespeare, any of your so-called Moorish historians, and ancient Hikuta, ancient South America, etc. Then you're dealing with, say, maybe some Germanic transliterations or certain languages that you're not too familiar with. You go to the etymology dictionary, look at the origin of the word, and you look at its morphology, how it translates from one language to another. You don't need to necessarily know the language. All you need is the dictionary and trace the word. Then it'll trace you in stage to its origin and the different formats or languages that is commonly used in. And so then what you would do, then you place a timeline. So you take the context in which the writer that you may be studying wrote the literature, and then you would take the word in the context of its meanings at that time. But with the absolute consideration that it never stopped meaning what it originally meant from its mother, from its origin. And this is the way all scholarship is done. But that's basic grammar. Understand, what I'm telling you is basic grammar. Are we clear? Basic grammar rules. It's just not commonly taught to people who are targeted to be miseducated. They're not told those rules so that they can't compete. Are we clear? But they're not unknown rules. They're just not taught to people who are targeted. So if you don't want somebody to compete with your children, you ain't going to teach them etymology. Are we clear? This is why in North America particularly, they would have separate schools so that the Asiatic children would never get the basic education that's necessary for them to compete. Are we clear? And it will appear as the generations pass that these children were either dumb or had some kind of genetic flaw when in fact they were actually being deliberately miseducated. Are we clear? Then what they would do would be, now also look at this, every year they have international conferences on education. Just keep that in mind. And they would plant what you call connotative linguistics for targeted communities. Meaning that they would sit around in think tanks and think of what is called connotative meanings and start burying the true meanings of vital words or important things in society, and would introduce false meanings in targeted communities as fad or hood language. And they'd be thinking they made this stuff up, you know, in the hood. And it's introduced. Mind control. Scholars know that. Sociologists know that. High priests know that. Masons, Illuminati, Caetera, Ku Klux Klan, Eastern Stars, all know this. The dumb believers who pay all the bills, who think they're paying Jesus, is the target and don't know these things. Are we clear? And to them, see, all the secret societies, they're the devil, so you don't listen. They rule, they're writing all your books. The same people that they call them devil worshippers are writing all their books. All the Masons and Illuminati, they controlling all your sandwiches. You know, putting all the chips in your phone. I got this, you don't know. I know my boy down the strings. See, because they don't know how I'm rolling with this. They made it. They got you covered. So get over yourself. You know, we really need to get our egos out the way and understand that we've been played and we're being played. Our issue with you in general is to kind of get rid of your naivety and your ego at the same time. Don't mean let somebody step on you, but get rid of your ego. You know, we need to fix some things. And we need to wake you up to kind of the real world politics and appeal to you to stop depending on your belief systems that ain't going to help you. They're burning and wasting your energy and like a parasite. You know, it's like somebody talking about, oh man, you cut your arm. Oh, stop. Let me take off my sock. Wrap it. No. I don't think so. Let it bleed. You know, it didn't get infected. Don't wrap it. Tourniquets. Nah, I got this. Hold it like that, you know. But the deal is, black's an adjective. A scholar immediately knows it's not an identity. And that if it's applied to a human being, it's pejorative. Which means it's diversion, it's meant to injure, or meant to slander. A person who can't read, that never dawns on them. Why? Because they don't know the basic rules. It's not that they're stupid, it's not that they're dumb, they just don't know. They never, you know, you don't know how to count. You know, like here, give this 10. You know, she's got a 1 and a 0. So you say, well, let's see. This 10 got a 1 and a 0. So 0 is nothing and it's 1. So I'll give you this 5 for that 10. Oh, you got that. You know, you think you got over. And they do that to children. But you can't get that off on an adult. You understand what I'm saying to you? Likewise, a person who can read, you can't get off some kind of sly statement, or what is called a semantic statement, and they swear that you didn't just, you know, oh, that's tight. They didn't just trick you. Because you can't read. Don't mean you don't. You lack information. You know, so just keep that in mind. So, black, according to science, means death. Not etymological, but in relationship to the capacity of inheritance in a sociological setting. Are we clear? Why? Because it takes you out of heritability, because you must honor your mothers and your fathers. How and why? That your days may be longer upon the earth. That's physical. Given to you by your what? Your gods or your fathers. That's heritability. So they put the black tag on you. It didn't matter whether it was green, purple. You accepted it, you lost inheritance. Then when you do business, you're doing business in his name. And name is inheritance. Who are you, Smith? Oh, you know, I know you've heard before in different times where Europeans, where Asiatics might be applying for some job or some communications, and they may go on the phone, and then they go into a job or a position, and the people still looking for Smith to come in, and he said, well, Smith, oh, I didn't know that was you. On the phone, they thought you were somebody else. You know, because they're going by the name, it doesn't fit really who you are. And they may have missed your accent. You know, stuff like that. But it's sort of like a Chinese brother with Manchurian or Taini, because Taini, you know, Tion, come in and you say, well, oh, here's my Chinese brother, you know, we're doing some business here. And they say, What's your name, bro? And he said, Joe Belosky. Well, it's kind of Italian, isn't it? You know, it's the same thing. So when people of Asiatic African descent, they don't recognize that when they go out into the world and they're saying they're Smith, Jones, and Johnson, and they wonder why people kind of deal with them kind of strangely, because it really doesn't fit you. Because it's not yours. You know, but they kind of figure, oh, you must be black. Yeah. But it's a tag. That means that you must be an outcast. Well, our people think that the black means identity. What the black tag does, it distinguishes you from other Asiatic Africans. Because civilized people maintain their pedigree, their bloodline. Right? So if you call, as an example, a civilized person black and he's from Nigeria, you might get a fight. You ain't going to insult him because you just told him that he's Christian property. He may be, but he ain't going down like that. Because he know he's not a converso. Them conversos is mostly them people in that neighborhood call themselves monkeys, which means Negro, black, and whatever. They think it's African. They ain't damn African identity. Those are outcast Africans, outcast Asiatics, Negro, black, colored, Latinos. All those are tags that Europeans put on us. They are not the pedigree names of the people. But once you accepted them, that's a curse. Are we clear? Now, on the Dungy case, do you see that? I'm not going to do that to you. But I'm going to finish this page in King Alfred, then I'll do that Dungy case for you. Now, note at the appropriate time. Now, pay attention to this because this is very interesting in the King Alfred. At this appropriate time to be designated by the president, the leaders of some of these organizations are to be detained only when it is clear that they cannot prevent the emergency. This is predicated on the times that you're seeing now and that are accelerating now where, you know, there's no jobs, they'll be stealing people's bank accounts, and they'll be making heavy foreclosures at every opportunity they get on people's properties or estates. And people really start feeling the crunch, you know, where they can't pray their asses out of this stuff no more type stuff. And, you know, winter doesn't take mercy on them because they say they're Muslim, or because they Baptist Episcopalian, the cheeks don't warm up, you know, no matter what you say. And then they start abandoning their faith. You know, I was chilly a little while ago, but it's really freezing now, and I think I'm losing my faith. Yeah, oh, what did you got? And stuff, you know, type stuff. When it gets really like that, then you start abandoning all that belief stuff. You know, somebody got a match, let's, you know, chop this tree down and do something. You know, let's get real. You know, and so people are going to be forced to get real in life because everything's going to be taken from you. And you better believe that. Because Rome's mission is to strip you of everything, which is expressed in the book of Job. They intend to take everything. And so the people who have been playing it safe, thinking that, you know, they get along with Rome, you know, kiss each cheek daily and the Pope's ring, and that he's going to keep giving them sandwiches. Well, when he ain't got no more sandwiches, you know, these overseers ain't getting no sandwiches either. You know, and so that's what that's really all about. So number of the game is up, if you get the point. The jig is up. Go ahead, Dr. Knight, give her the mic too.
It's Sheik. Can you expound a little bit on how you just said, you mentioned how they want to take everything that's expressed in the book of Job. Can you expound a little bit on how a so-called ancient document which we call the Bible has contemporary meaning and context and how it was intended that way and how it was, kind of masked as something that either happened in the past or going to happen in the future when you think in terms of revelation, but how it really is a now.
Yes. Because the Bible is actually derivative from Septuaginta. So Septuagint, so write that down. And because you need to be aware of what the priesthood know, because as we're talking about these things, we want to remove your senses of naivety, that are amongst us. And not to necessarily think because by creed that you're one religion or the other, that these books don't apply to you. They're all our books. Are we clear?
Can you spell that S word, Septuagint?
All right. Un momento. I think that's the right spelling.
No, I-N-T.
Huh?
I-N-T. G-I-N-T. 2A, A
Oh.
for the I, and
Except,
two, G-I-N-T.
yes, Septuagint. Now, also, Septuaginta, but Septuagint mainly. But Septuaginta. Now, from this comes what you have now called this. This is derived from so even the Bible is not that book. Basically, because what we call Bible is sort of like from the city where we made a lot of paper, and a lot of the paper that was used was papyrus, actually, that was used in books around the world, was made in biblios. And so loosely, the Book of the Sun, or Eleotech, that is what that book is, derived from Septuaginta. They started calling it Bible. And because a lot of people think that that's a specific name just for that book, because that's the way it's presented to the world, but that's not really true. All right? That's just to let you kind of wake you up, to remove naivety. Because we're not naive about a lot of these things. Oh, this is special. This is this is named after the city. And a lot of other books, they had a whole bunch of books come. These are Bibles. These are books from biblios. But with that Heliotech, or Book of the Sun, which is a transliteration, and understand Septuagint is 7. But the scholars were actually 72 scholars that were assigned to transliterate Septuaginta into this. And in doing so, they were also assigned to remove certain books so that they could maintain mind control for the people. So even though Septuaginta is, as it would be presented today, would be close to this, for the masses, they still modified that because they don't want you to know that they've been playing with the people. Are we clear? And, yeah, that's it. So the Bible is really heliotech, or book of the sun. And so essentially, it's a anthropomorphic. So I know you're going to ask me, so I'm going to write that down.
Thank you.
So the Bible really is an anthropomorphic astrological projection of the equinoxes of the sun and the calculations of the millennium that is sort of like a map or wheel turning where master astrologers look at both the past and the future through the geometry of the mathematics, which does not lie. And from that you get prophecy. Are we clear? So the book, in its anthropomorphic form, would give personalities to actually millennia, chronology blocks that may include thousands of years, dynasties, and not necessarily the individual persons. Like you see King David, from King David, King Butchie Boy, and he was messing with Susie Girl on, the one that comes on Power and stuff, and the girl plays in Empire. That's how they, all these personalities, most of these people didn't exist. They were actually millennial, but yet some of them did. Do you understand? And they used an expression that would be called anthropomorphic. Like when you were growing up and they had Elmo, and Elmo talks and stuff like that, that's called anthropomorphic. That's taking a being and expressed in the nature of a different type of species being. Or animals talking and stuff like that. That's anthropomorphic. Are we clear? Or forces and powers, or like the sun in the sky, and they call it Jesus. And it's really actually the Son of God. Actually, that Son. In its true form. But Jesus, the children can relate to. So they're looking at the warmth, the so-called love, the salvation. In the wintertime, they can't wait for Jesus to come because everybody's cold now. So they wait for Jesus to rise so we can get warm again. So we're waiting for the spring, can't wait for Easter.
Right. Right.
You understand? Now, as we're going into the winter solstice, right? Mm-hmm. So when we get to December 21st, sun stands still. So now Jesus is in the tomb for 3 days until the 25th. You see? And then he's born again, 25th of December, and he starts the ascension again. And then you start seeing the days get longer again. But now as you see we're coming into it, it gets shorter and shorter. So it gets darker earlier. So it's dying. You see? So even your holidays, which means days of the sun. So Halik, as an example, Halik is Sanskrit. And Halik, Sanskrit, means sun. And it means he burns. Now, in Sanskrit, or what you call he burns, you'll see the symbolism anthropomorphic in ancient Sindh, right? You'll see Krishna, and you'll see him always expressed with very dark skin, dark blue, or ebony, and symbolizing he burns, from the sun, right? And so that's Hali or Krishna, and this is where you get Christ. And so Christ, Krishna, is the Son of God. Once you understand, so now that's anthropomorphic. So when you see the image of Krishna, you're looking at this image. But that's not really what it means. But if you don't know the culture, you think that was actually a man being, type thing. All right? Or, go ahead.
How do you spell Sinde? Or the term that was used for India? Sinde?
Sind is actually the ancient name for what you call Hindustan.
Right.
That's not really India,
Right.
and they're not Indians either.
Correct.
With this Indian thing, the Europeans made that up. And this is one of the things that the Romans do when they conquer people is that they deliberately change the names of peoples and lands to disconnect the next generation, so they can make a claim on the land. Then they put their tags on it. You accept their tags, and you be thinking that you and your history, you're actually on the Roman. But it's out of not knowing yourself. This is why the Christians would do so much to burn books and to burn culture, so that people lose reference point. Then after a few generations, if somebody doesn't preserve it, the next generations are lost. That's basically what's been happening to our children. That's why our families are broken.
Islam, I believe you wanted also to know how to spell it. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's Sindhi.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's what you wanted to know?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Or like you see the Sinde, the river Sinde.
Right.
So, European corruption is India. And no such thing. Yeah. Over 2,000 years ago, about 20, might be around 25, the Moors renamed Sinde Hindustan. And so, even like say, if you see some of the brothers, say at gas stations or something like that, and they'll go along that Indian thing because they know that people are ignorant. But you could say Hindustan, all right, yeah, they know. Because they know who you are too. They just know that these people are asleep. And while they're asleep, they're dangerous. They're dangerous to themselves and they're dangerous to everybody else because they're full of hate and confusion. You know what I mean? And it's kind of hard to clean them up because they won't get rid of their belief systems, which came from Rome, which is mind contamination. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's also important to know history, because we're kind of separated from the rest of the human family mentally. So we need to fix that. But anyway, so Holly, this is also where you get, this is very important. That's where you get holy. All right? That's also where you get holy. So you don't miss that.
Okay.
So when they say Holy Bible, they're saying Sun Book. So when they say Sun Book, that's Heliotech. You see? All right? So when they say holy holiday, all your holidays are based on stations of the sun in the ethers or the heavens. And so all your major holidays of all the so-called culture around the world is based on positions of the sun or the moon. That's what operates on this planet. So that culture is universal, you see. So that's just so when the personalities are given to it, just like Santa Claus and a sleigh, as an example, anthropomorphic, that's the Big Dipper. So now when they're little children, you say Santa Claus and a sleigh. So that's why they always show you reindeer running through clouds and past the moon, but it's really showing the shape of the Big Dipper in the heavens. Now, so children, they can't get down with, you see those stars where they are, and children say, well, which one? The ones over there looking like, and so you draw lines and say, oh, that was like a slave. That's what, saying. So that's anthropomorphic, right? So that's giving humanistic form to forces and powers or an animal, blending them to express them in a storyline to children. That would be anthropomorphic. All right? And as Isaiah, a month or so ago, when you went into the book of Malachi, the 4th chapter, when it says the Son of Righteousness arises with healing in his wings in the Bible, it says Son, S-U-N. But people who are locked into the anthropomorphic mentality never notice that spelling because their mind is locked into Jesus, the Son of God, the image that they see on the wall. So you have adults that are still in the child's mind. Now, the priest got them under control. All right, so that would be, that person's in a state of solace, not in a state of wisdom, in a state of solace. Now, in truth, if the priest was honest when the children, get up, 9, 8, 9, they start telling them the truth about what this stuff is. But instead, they keep the adults in the anthropomorphic level of boys and girls and paying bills. So the priesthood is dirty and selfish. And this is what we reflected in the story where Jesus is arguing with the priesthood down at the temples, where they know the truth and they hinder the little ones. They themselves know the truth. And then they deceive the people and they got their hands in their pocket. And then, of course, they don't like him no more, so they're going to assassinate him because he's blowing their game. Because they're con artists, he know they're con artists, they know they're con artists, and they hide behind this God game, using anthropomorphic mind controls on the adults because they never told them to graduate, kept them in grade school. So anthropomorphic is not a negative, it's just that it's for children. But when we appreciate each other, but if we ask the adults come up here and show the people what you can do, and, show and tell, and they pull out them blocks they had since they was 2 years old, and they're about 5 minutes and we're looking for them to create miracles, and they just spell cat and wait for the audience to clap. And they're 35 years old. I mean, you're not exactly impressed. You wonder whether they pumping you, and you don't want to mock them because they may be short. At the same time, you be wondering whether they, you're like, you serious? And then you have them wrapped in fancy paper. You're supposed to give them to the babies, man. Come on, man, And it's sort of like the same thing. So in the real world, as you've grown up and you don't know these things, they already know you're under the mind control. Are we clear? They're not going to say it, they just take advantage of you. And they don't want anybody coming and pulling that wool off your eyes. Are we clear? So they don't want anyone coming and pulling the wool off your eyes and letting you know what's up. Are we clear? Now, King Alfred, now keep this in mind. That's these 2 paragraphs here. Do you have that here? Pull this up, Dad.
Isaiah?
Yeah.
Isaiah.
These 2 paragraphs right here.
I'm glad Isaiah do it to you. Pull it up.
All right. Yeah, right there. These 2 paragraphs, we're going to deal with these 2 paragraphs. All right? Because I want you all to see what I'm reading. Now, most of you have seen this before, but those of you who haven't seen this and understand this is military operations, understand that your politicians, your council people, your mayors, all the people that's been governing you, all your so-called black leader guys, your community leaders, and all of these people that care about you so much. This is their political manual. Are we clear? It's not generally public because they don't want you to know what they know. See, because if you know what they know, they can't play you. You know, like once you learn how to play pinochle, they can't keep getting free lunch from you. You get the point? Because once you learn how to play, you might learn how to play better than then they got to sit down. They can't sit up there and go, jump 2 feet across the stage and everybody's impressed. Who did that? The Lord? He ain't getting that off. He gets that off with the children. He ain't getting that off with you. So keep getting that off. You got to keep everybody dumb. You understand what I'm saying? So, this is the real politics. So what is it that they know about you that you don't know about you? What is it that they've always known about our people that our people haven't known? Now, most of you know this, but in general, you know daggone well that when you talk to most of our people, they're going to teach their children, that the Europeans brought our people here on the good ship Jesus in 1555 and all that kind of stuff. They don't never show the ship, but good ship Jesus. And brought you to the hells in North America. See, because what it was, you see, the black man, being God and stuff, was building pyramids and stuff. See, he was on the shores of Africa in the deepness of the melanin of hotepness. And with the science, building pyramids. You understand what I'm saying? But he made a mistake. He had his back turned. And the white man came over there, knocked him upside the head, opened a factory and built some chains, and then chained them all together. And then when they woke up, oh man, what's this, man? Then they took them on ships and brought them over here to the hells of North America, and we've been catching hell ever since. And that's the storyline, and everybody buys that storyline, right? We've been here for millions of years. Stop, cut, bogus. None of that stuff is true. Now, while they teach that party line, among themselves, politically, in their manual, this is what they know. Are we clear? And their so-called black leaders who they train know that too.
What's that? Shoelace.
Is that why I was tripping? I'll get with that. Now this is what's up here, and this is what I'm reading from here. At the appropriate time to be designated by the president, the leaders of some of these organizations are to be detained only when it is clear that they cannot prevent the emergency. Working with local public officials during the first critical hours, all other leaders are to be detained at once. Compiled lists of minority leaders have been readied at the National Data Computer Center. It is necessary to use the minority leaders designated by the president in much the same manner in which we use minority members who are agents with central and federal, and we cannot, until there is no alternative, reveal King Alfred in all its aspects. Minority members of Congress will be unseated at once. This move is not without precedent in American history. That's the Attorney General. Now, preliminary memo, Department of Defense. And it's important to recognize this so when you, as a rule, keep thinking that politicians and your so-called community leaders don't understand you, or you got to prove something to them, or you got to make them understand how you feel, you're the one out to lunch. They already know. You're just been miseducated, that's all. Pay attention to this next paragraph. Preliminary memo, Department of Defense. This memo is being submitted in lieu of a full report from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, that is all heads of all military operations. Are we clear? And your alphabet soup guys, all coming together in a think tank. Are we clear? That report is now in preparation. There will be many cities where the minority will be able to put into the street a superior number of people with a desperate and dangerous will. He will be a formidable enemy, for he is bound to the continent by heritage. Pay attention to that. He is bound to the continent. He didn't say country, the continent. I.e., you're the Americans. This is your heritage. Are we clear? You didn't come from someplace else. And everybody knows but you. Are we clear? So when they're playing dumb, you don't let them get that off now that you know the game. Neither do you let them so-called black leaders get that off with the so-called fake black diaspora. Are we clear? He will be a formidable enemy. They declared you the enemy because they're conquering you. Are we clear? And they've been talking racism to get you off the idea that you're being conquered. Are we clear? Race is a species. They're conquering you. That's why they've been abusing you. Are we clear? For he is bound to the continent by heritage and knows that political asylum will not be available to him in other countries. So these people who think they're going home to the motherland, you're on the motherland. Are we clear? So you ain't getting no asylum elsewhere because you need to fix your nigger problem here. Now you understand why Dwally say the Negro problem can only be solved in one way that it can, through the Moorish Divine International Movement. It was set up to restore your lost estate. And that is your missionary work to yourselves and to your children to solve this nigger problem. It's an artificially created construct under European colonial operations. You've been under Roman rulership. That's your abuse, not racism, not color. Roman Unam Sanctam policy. Are we clear? And it is known by all the politicians. Now, what happens, why are they worried about you finding this out? Because all of these nigger groups that have been draining your economies for generations, you will immediately stop supporting them, knowing that they're diversions. You'll stop burning your energy and your finance for Reverend Pigfoot trying to save you when the enemy is standing right there before you. Are we clear? And the devil ain't did a damn thing to you. It's the Europeans. Are we clear? With their Negro helpers. Are we clear? And so the deal is, get over yourself. Your economies and your energies are being drained into institutions and organizations that are of no worth, run by Europeans through their Negro leadership to keep you weak economically and politically. Are we clear? Once you start taking them piggies off your back, they are not freckles, they're leeches. Start taking them freckles off, then after a while you start, Dad, I feel a little bit better. Yeah, because you got all them suckers off of you. You get the point? Then your mind start clearing up a little bit, and you start redirecting your energies. You're not poor, you've been sucked on. Are we clear? So once you stop the mental bleeding, you stop the economic bleeding. And then once you understand who you really are, you start coming together by nature, because you'll start recognizing that you are your brother's keepers, not because somebody said so, because you still simply are. And you've been neglecting your duty in nature, not in belief, in nature. And they've been sucking on you through your ignorance that you've accepted from false teaching. That's been keeping you busy. We're in the movement. Yeah, man, I see y'all moving. Yeah, we're in the struggle. You know what I mean? And you say, oh, that's cool, boy. And then you move the camera back and you see they on a treadmill. They ain't gonna know. They're on the treadmill talking about they in the movement. And so this is pretty much what we've been doing in the name of so-called black progress going no damn where in the name of all kinds of gods that never worked, when we don't even have a background into the knowledge where all these things come from. You know what I mean? And so, but once you start doing the studies, you start losing your naivety. You know, and then of course kind of hurts your feelings. Man, all these years, man. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm not sorry she's gone now, but I'm going to apologize because I never appreciated Grandma. I swear I thought Santa Claus was buying me all them bikes. Grandma is struggling, scrubbing floors, and everything, buying you bikes, and you've been giving Santa Claus the credit. You know, type stuff. You know, but the deal is the same thing in reality. That we've been giving idol gods credit for what our parents have been doing for us. And they've been struggling, and most of these idol god concepts came from Rome, having nothing to do with Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, or any of them. They've been hiding behind these names. Are we clear? While they themselves didn't accept that BS they've been feeding to the masses. You know, but the deal is when you wake up, you start, you know, getting over yourself, getting your ego together, and giving that crap back to them, that's all. And then start redirecting your energy into things that are of value or worth, and start burning your energy in positive things. Start willing good on people. And logically, when the vampires come, you know, they try to chill with you and everything. Say, oh, don't need to chill with me. I got my turtleneck on today. You know, he pissed now. You know, so now when you go to the vampy parties, you know what I mean? Everybody going to the party with their shades on and stuff like this. You know, you go on the party with matches and cake and stuff. And so you get in the cave, you lighting candles and stuff. Everybody says, you know, yeah, I'm lighting these candles. Everybody cut your lights on, flashlights. You know, or they be pissed off you out, you ain't coming to no more parties. And that's what you gotta do. So when you bring truth, you actually throw light on the falsehood. And the falsehood can't live where there is truth. So unbury the truth and share it with others. Go ahead, brother. I know you got something. How you feeling?
No.
All right,
I just wanted you to do, if you could very quickly give a backdrop as to how the King Alfred plan became available to the public. I missed that.
Say again?
How did the King Alfred plan become available to the public?
Oh, we talked about that earlier. Actually, a guy got that actually off one of the computers that they bought from the desert. You know, the U.S. corporation was selling those computers supposed to be white clean, and he knew a little bit about computers. And this is some of the information redacted. It was originally redacted. When we use computers, they get some of the redactions clear, they disappear them. You know. And that's came out because actually this is top secret document. It ain't top secret now, even though a lot of people have it. However, as you already know, a lot of people will have it, will immediately start blinding people with the argument, racism and prejudice, and people start arguing that rather than paying attention to details that is exposing that we're the people of the land. It's number one. And that they all know that. Number two, those are the two principal things that you need to know. Also, when you go into the area about government structure, you're familiar with that area, right? Where it talks about people, you know, want the benefit of knowledge and not the work. And we always encourage you, when you come here, you always know that we encourage you all to read and to get books. Islam, go ahead, bro. Go ahead. Oh. I also want to read, say, Top Secret Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars and Introductory Programming Manual. So the politicians, your leaders and community leaders, your clergy, etc., are all programmed with this literature. This, with also including the Christian Black Codes of 1724, are their programming manuals. This is their reference, which means in them back rooms, when you're dealing with taxation in communities, When you deal with organized corporation and everything, this is one of their training manuals, which means this is one of their tools. You be thinking they have attitudes. No, they ain't got attitudes. They're enforcing Unam Sanctam, which is just simply now called King Alfred, which is simply now called Homeland Security. You know, and people who don't understand, they're looking at these different names in different times. These are all Unam Sanctum operations. They're different time, they're not separate. So when these people think at all that these politicians and these leader guys don't